All right, gang, welcome back to Beyond the Pump podcast, where we are going to break down the top 5 bicep exercises that you need to be giving your clients in their programming right now. So I'm going to kick this off and really throw out a story here, or not a story, because I don't know that I have experienced this, but I feel like it's a common idea that guys, dudes specifically, and hey, maybe females, I don't know, are always just trying to look better, wearing their shirt, without their shirt, and that bicep is just one of those things that always needs to be worked on. So, I think there's some work to be done here, and there's probably a lot of context that I know Andrew, you're going to want to add, but let's just jump in and I'm going to actually reverse order ask you guys this question. So if you had 1 through 5 listed in your brain, as I'm teeing this up here, you now need to reverse that order of what would we say is the 5th best bicep exercise that we can give a client, or hey, if you're doing a workout and you're listening to this, that you could or should be doing in your workout. So what's the 5th best one, Andrew?
I mean, the first thing that jumps in my head is more of like an accessory, which I guess if we're talking about bicep and single joint exercises in general, to provide context, we're looking at just bending the elbow under load. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. The one that jumps out for me is that a lot of people spend time typing. And if we're talking about the traditional desk warrior, there's something called a Zottman curl, which is traditionally done with dumbbells. And it entails that basically you do a traditional regular bicep curl where your hand starts neutral, you bring it up to your shoulder, under that strict tight control. But then as you come down, rather than just lowering it the same way, all you're going to do is take that palm that's facing your head as you're coming up, and you're going to turn it palm down and lower it that way. So you get a lot of supination, pronation, kind of basically getting the forearm to rotate a little bit. And that's definitely something that's useful. I wouldn't say it's the best if we're talking about adding cross-sectional area or adding mass to your bicep or really being able to load it heavy. But it is really good for like a lot of the nerve stuff and bicep stuff in my experience and what I understand about that. What about you, Braden?
Whew. So I'll be real honest, real quick with you guys. I don't do too much bicep exercises, just because
I call bullshit. Have you seen your biceps, bro?
He's pretty jacked, guys.
I literally 16 inches is like average, but a lot of it is my tricep. I give credits a little bit more to my triceps.
That's fair.
But I think for myself, for I guess the worst, I would probably I don't know. I think maybe like I love it and I hate it, but I want to say the traditional bicep curl, just because there's a lot of room for error that I've seen with just attending the gym. There's a lot of people swinging their whole body to get the momentum, so you learn improper bicep movement mechanics, and because of ego lifting, you have people that are curling like 50-60 pounds, but it's almost like really just turns into like a shoulder workout really at the end of the day, because they're not really engaging the bicep properly and doing the movement correctly. And I think the bicep curls, traditional standing bicep curl exercise, sets people up for the least amount of success. I don't think it's bad by any means, but I think there is there's some skill and technicalities that do need to be implemented into the traditional bicep curl in order to be done correctly. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time compared to a lot of the other exercises that come to mind right off the bat.
Well, let me ask you this, Brandon. When you say the traditional bicep curl, like what are you talking about? Are you referring
like
a specific dumbbell, like what implement?
Dumbbell, standing dumbbell bicep curl, just standing up straight up and just curling the bicep. Yeah, I think I did a year of personal training and got really, really picky. I mean, even for myself, I was curling 50, 45 pounds at one point. But I was like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. Why do my shoulders hurt? Decided to, because I was tossing them, decided to really like kind of go through a humbling experience. I reset my bicep exercises, literally grabbed the 2.5 pounds and was progressively overloading over the next, X amount of months and years, and to just really get that form down. And now, I mean, like I'm 30 pounds is where I'm at now, where I can comfortably feel like, okay, this is tough. This is going to be a challenging one. And, it's 20s, 25s. Those are my working weights essentially. But yeah, anything over 30, because your biceps is a small muscle. It's only compared to triceps, 3, and then your biceps, 2. It's a smaller muscle. Won't get into the anatomy too much there. But yeah, again, I think it's just the bicep curl, traditional bicep, standing bicep curl. It's a great exercise when done correctly, but I think there's just a lot of room for error that newer lifters will bump into.
So Zottman curl number 5, traditional standing bicep curl is number 4, by virtue of it's too easy to fuck it up and do it wrong. Sounds like. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So number 3, what's number 3, Andrew?
I'd say it's probably a barbell drag curl, which is traditionally something that's done very strict. I'm a big fan of barbell curls in general recently, specifically a little more wide, because you tend to get a lot more of a different angle on the wrist. But the drag curl is performed with traditionally like your back up against a wall. And essentially, the idea is you are trying to actually extend the shoulder joint, so your elbows are going backwards a little bit as you're trying to curl the bar right up against your body, which is why it's called the drag curl. But it's supposed to be something that targets the long head a little more so. And that's one of the reasons why, I think in my experience, the long head doesn't get enough love. And it is something like, along with the coracobrachialis that crosses 2 joints, your elbow and your shoulder, tends to be heavily implicated in shoulder pain. And so I do find that when people tend to have a little bit of that nagging shoulder stuff, the drag curl can be a great way to rectify that, simply for the fact that A, you have to decrease the load, and B, it's very strict, and it is exactly what just Brandon said, can be very humbling from the angle of just how that force has to get produced. So I would say more valuable than the Zottman, from a mechanics and like a pain alleviation at the same time. Also really helping you feel that long head and really distinguishing that maybe from the short head a little bit.
Okay. So number 3 is going to be a drag curl using a barbell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. All right. Brandon, you got number 2 top of mind?
I think it's kind of similar. You're not up against a wall, but I am a big fan of the preacher curls variations, anything with your arms up, because again, kind of what I was talking about with the bicep curls, where you can swing it. Your arms are essentially on a bench.
Like a pad.
What are those things? A pad, yeah. I've never had to word that thing before. But yeah, you're on a preacher curl machine, which essentially you're sitting down. You can be standing. Put your arms over that and you curl. And that really forces you to have to put all of the the tension in the bicep properly, so that you are forced to use the bicep muscle properly. Again, I'm a big fan of, contracting the right muscles. And so that one's a burner. That's a burner for sure too. And if you really want to make it harder on yourself, control that tempo so that you're just not swinging it, because that'll just defeats the purpose. If you want to get big arms, you got to trust the process. Take your time, and because again, it's smaller muscle, so it's going to take time. But if you really want to curl your arms, focus on your triceps. It's a little secret.
Do make up 60% of your arm for sure. So that's definitely a great way to go about it.
We'll talk about that in another episode.
I feel like it's less than 60% because you got like bones and all the other things in there. But when we're talking about the major muscles within the upper arm, then sure.
Like 53.9% for sure.
Yeah, definitely a 53 point something percent.
Yeah, at least.
All right. I would say my number 1, though.
Moving to number 1. This is the one that every program should have in it at this point in time.
Yes, absolutely. So, in my 23 years of coaching and my experience as an exercise physiologist, I would say that the number 1 bicep curl variation that you could do in 2024 is something that's going to help your posture. It's something that is going to allow you to move better. It's something that is going to do something that kind of aligns with something called lengthened partials in some form or fashion, which is basically where you just take the end range and you add extra tension via a stretch. But it is a reclined, not an incline, but a reclined dumbbell bicep curl. right? If you want to add the Zottman variation, it's great. But basically, you put the bench at an incline and you lay back on the bench and your arms are hanging by the sides, which allows you to put that shoulder into that extension, which again, basically, if you think about good posture, keeping your shoulders back and together, that arm's going to dangle, which causes in that extension of the shoulder, that extra stretch, and adding an eccentric lowering, a slow lowering component to that. Chef's kiss. You're going to get a lot of the postural benefits, a lot of the flexibility benefits in the shoulder, as well as getting a lot of that time under tension by slowing it down and controlling it. And I think that overall is probably the number one thing that I put in most of my clients' programs this recent era of my life.
All right. There we have it. Our top 5 bicep curls that belong in every program. Now, just as we round out this episode here, and it's always that common question. I went through time as personal trainer, own some gyms, and you learn all these things. And the idea of putting bicep curls in programs kind of gets bashed a lot, I think, because of, why do that with your trainer? It's a waste of time. It's just a muscle that makes you look good. So just to round this out, what are some benefits of actually putting in specific, strict, targeted bicep work in the program, making sure that your client, that the person doing the workout is actually achieving something? What does that outcome look like?
I think that it really just comes down to when we look at movement in general, and let's just pretend that we're playing a sport, right? If you're running, there are certain muscles that are involved in that sport that you want to look at what's going to be the weakest link in that specific movement. And when we think about, using the bicep, which is something that is heavily involved in most pulling motions, from your pull-ups to any kind of horizontal pulling. If you're a wrestler, you're obviously going to be hooking and pulling and pushing a little bit. So those are just some of the general ideas and examples of how that might be involved. Most people, when you think about your larger muscle groups like your lats, which are also heavily involved in those pulling motions, sometimes those might be a little bit stronger. And so the weaker part of that pulling in someone's ability to maximally pull something might actually be the weaker bicep. And so one of the things that I would do after every set when I was coaching people is I would ask them, hey, what felt fatigue? Where did you feel that most? And that's one of the best questions people can ask in any kind of coaching scenario is, where did you feel that and how did it feel? And you start to understand what's probably working harder. And so in a pull-up, for instance, if someone says my biceps are getting the most fatigued, I can't pull, and their lats aren't really taking a lot of that brunt, or they're not getting fatigued enough, this is what would change then the workout program, where I might want to increase their muscle endurance on that bicep to have it be more tolerant to fatigue. And at the same time, if their lats aren't necessarily experiencing any fatigue, or they're not getting enough of that damage to cause a need to grow, then I might also have to add in some straight arm lat pull downs or something a little more lat specific. So that way that gets enough work and the bicep isn't limiting the growth of the lat, while at the same time still getting it what it needs. So that's my opinion on that.
I can't believe you got that wrong. It makes you look good without a shirt on, bro. That was the answer.
I mean, it makes your juicy sleeves. That's what I call it.
That was the answer. That was the answer.
Show me your new tattoo, Steve.
That was the answer. I can't flex right now. It hurts. That whole armpit area is just sore. But all right. Well, yeah, that's a wrap on top 5 bicep exercises, why we want to throw them in there, and how that's going to benefit your client.